Learn how to diagnose your organizations with today's amazing special guest, Jon Bassford. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast, where we make AI simple, practical, and accessible for small business owners and leaders. Forget the complicated tech talk or expensive consultants. This is where you'll learn how to implement AI strategies that are easy to understand and can make a big impact for your business. The Artificial Intelligence Podcast is brought to you by Fraction AIO, the trusted partner for AI digital transformation. At Fraction AIO, we help small and medium-sized businesses boost revenue by eliminating time-wasting, non-revenue generating tasks that frustrate your team. With our custom AI bots, tools, and automations, we make it easy to shift your team's focus to the tasks that matter most, driving growth and results. We guide you through a smooth, seamless transition to AI, ensuring you avoid costly mistakes and invest in the tools that truly deliver value. Don't get left behind. Let Fraction AIO help you stay ahead in today's AI-driven world. Learn more and get started at fractionaio.com. Now, Jon, I'm really excited to have you here because I think it's really important to kind of see where business is going in the future, as well as kind of where artificial intelligence kind of integrates. A lot of people are very trepidatious about the future. CEOs all the way down to entry-level people are worried that AI is going to take their jobs. So when you kind of approach a company for AI transformation, have you noticed that there's this new underlying tone that people are worried that the transformation means they're all going to get replaced with robots? And how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of been a common theme across the board. And, the first thing I always say is like, look, the thing that make the headlines, right? People respond to headlines. When IBM slashes 10,000 jobs or, some big tech company slashes 10,000 jobs, you're talking about companies that are the cutting edge of technology to begin with and are creating proprietary AI software to do X, Y, and Z. For one, that is not your basic business, right? Your small business is not going to be able to do that. Your commercial grade AI products are not replacing jobs in that kind of magnitude, right? So that's one aspect I always point out to them, that there's two different worlds there when it comes to AI and how we utilize it. And then the second piece is for the actual adoption is, AI is a tool. And just like any tool, if you don't have the operational structure, to have the operational foundation to be able to use that tool properly, it's not going to change anything at all. And so I really focus with them on making sure that their internal operations, their leadership, their mindset, their culture are poised for innovation, growth, and change across the board, not just specifically for AI is what I really focus on. And then also, of course, we look at how we can bring AI into that fold.
I like that you brought up company culture there, because I think a lot of businesses don't have a sense of what company culture means. Some businesses think it means ping pong tables, some think it means Taco Tuesday, and some think it means like casual Friday. My feeling of the measurement of like leadership or a business is what happens when no one's looking. So if the boss gets sick, does everyone keep working? Does the machine keep running? To me, that's the measurement of company culture, but I'm interested in your perspective as a real expert.
Yeah, I mean that's a great example to do 100%. How I define that is, the spoken and unspoken rules, traditions, et cetera, that dictate what we do on a daily basis. So your example is 100% accurate, right? Like that's kind of, helps showcase how strong that culture is. But it's everything from our management style down to, again, how the staff does react. One of the things that I talk about in helping improve culture is creating a curious culture, which allows for, feedback, thinking, solutions, ideas, problem solving, pointing out issues, real time. And that requires kind of a collaboration agreement both between the management and the staff, right? So those are the things that I really look at to see, does it have a positive culture versus, like you said, the ping pongs, hoodies, and fruit cart tables.
Yeah, it seems like we sometimes get excited by the accessories of life or the flashy parts. And I think what's really fascinating to me about what you do is that you really look at implementation, organization, kind of the back end. Like I always say that the most important week in my business is like operations week, where I go back through and look for everything that's broken. Where does someone, and for me, that's a lot of like, where does someone get lost in an email system, or where's a piece of content I made not getting posted? Because those are the most boring things, but systems are the most important because that's really the core infrastructure. It doesn't matter how good a video is I make for YouTube if it doesn't get posted. It doesn't matter how good all the other social media content or repurposing is, which this happens to everyone, right? And it doesn't get posted to the other platforms. So we don't have a good scheduling system. And like, this is something I'm working on a lot on my business right now, but all these little pieces, or something I dealt with last year when I was working at a startup, and we had someone in charge of acquisition, like marketing, and someone in charge of new customers. But what happened is everyone who signed up got a free trial, and the marketing person's like, well, they've signed up, I'm not in charge. And the salesperson's like, well, they haven't bought anything, so I'm not in charge. And these little things dropped through that was a really interesting, that was my first big experience of corporate culture where both people was like, well, that's outside my territory. I shouldn't touch that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's the danger of creating silos, right? And creating, I'm all for creating organizations and creating cultures where silos and hierarchy gets broken down. Talking about, the little things being missed, and everything. I can tell you a lot about leadership, culture, and operations, especially in startups, but this goes across the board in how you function in accounting. When there's a CEO who has to see a bill come in the email, go through the system, get ready to pay, approval. They see a bill 4 or 5 different times before it's actually paid or till it's paid. Those type of things show me a lot about the organization and how things function and flow by one simple little thing of looking at the accounting. And that's a lot of times where I start with when I work with a company is I take a look at their accounting first because it tells me so much about the leadership and the culture of the organization.
One of the problems with smaller startups and with solopreneurship or things that start with someone's idea is that people don't record their systems. This is something that since I came from bootstrapping structures that, well, I know how I do everything. And it's very hard to explain it to someone without missing any steps when you're explaining how you write a blog post or how you write a proposal or what to do when a customer calls. And these systems are so critical because they're what allow you to go on vacation or to expand. When you bring on a new employee, if they don't have a set of here's what you're expected to do and here's the measurement of success, how do they know if they're doing a good job? And that's very stressful for someone. So that's kind of from the bottom up. One thing I'm really interesting is now that we're trying to go through kind of this almost like next revolution, right? We had the industrial revolution, then we had the technology evolution, and now we're kind of looking at the AI evolution or transformation or revolution. And are you noticing that it's dramatically affecting how you work with companies? Like, do you use AI as part of your process when you're auditing a company? Does it allow you to look at more data faster and then make quicker decisions? Or do you find that it's still more art than science?
I mean, I use it as a tool, as we talked earlier. It's definitely a tool that allows me to read and analyze much quicker. I have a process I follow, but instead of me going through dozens of pages of analysis, it cuts down the learning curve, the time for me to analyze. So it's much more of part of my internal process than my external process, but it absolutely is something. And I use AI in every aspect of my life, right? From, looking at SEC documents from stocks I'm in to help me build a SaaS product I'm launching right now to help me with my marketing. I use it across the board. Again, you have to be the final say in everything and make sure you're using an independent mind. AI is not batting 1,000. It gets a lot of things wrong. I joke all the time with AI about how I can't even get the day right most of the time. It thinks it's Sunday when it's Monday and vice versa. But it's a great tool if you know how to use it properly, know how to work with it and through it. But you always got to be that final say in making sure what it's putting out is plausible and right.
Now, one of the things that you do that I think is really fascinating is you connect operations with leadership and culture. Why is it that a company can't fix its operations without also looking at how people communicate, how they make decisions, and how they handle or adapt to change?
So, one thing I always say when looking at operations and culture, unless you're the lead singer of a one-person band, you have to bring your team along with you. And if you want to create an efficient, effective operations, a founder, CEO, manager should not and cannot see every little detail happening in the business and the organization, right? If they are, they're doing it wrong. Right. So you have to rely on your team. And the only way to have your team be a part of the solution is to build a good culture. So it takes the leadership for one, letting of control, letting go of fear, letting go of a lot of different things that allows them to trust their team, empower their team, that then allows the team to be that part of analyzing, reviewing, pointing out problems, bringing solutions to improving the operations for it all work together. For me, it's all about kind of looking at that diagram of leadership, culture, operations, and right in the middle where they intersect, that's where sustainable growth really happens.
So when a company is struggling, how much of the problem is process and how much of it's usually more leadership behavior?
Sometimes it depends a little bit on where I find the organization, if it's more established and just kind of needing a refresh. But usually it's a combination, right? It really is. And the more and more I work with clients and I dive into the curious leadership stuff from that I wrote the book on, I cannot fix a culture problem without touching something in the leadership. I can't fix an operational problem without touching something in the leadership and the culture. They really, really are commingled in such a way that if there is a problem with your operations, there's a problem likely in the other two, right? And so the key is finding those threads. Yes, we have an operations problem, but it's also tied to these issues. And so that's why I really focus on all three of those areas, is because if you fix just one area, you're fixing a symptom. By looking at all three areas, you're allowed to fix the symptom as well as the core issues behind them.
Why do outside advisors get listened to when sometimes they're saying the same thing as people on the inside have been saying for months?
That's kind of what inspired me to want to be a consultant. I was working for an organization. I was bringing ideas to the CEO, and he kept, just not listening to them or just not accepting the ideas. And someone brought the exact same idea from outside, and all of a sudden it was the best and greatest idea ever. I think partly just because, our team's our team, and we trust them to do a specific job. I think part of it is we put people in boxes, right? Like, I hired you to do this. I hired you to maintain the operations and do this. You're not who I hired to be a strategic thinker at the level I'm thinking over here. And so I tapped into this other person, and they had this great idea. I think it's just kind of mind blocks, right? Like we pigeonhole people, we put them in boxes. I don't think it's intentional. I don't think the CEO and founder I worked for didn't think I had good ideas. I made a lot of good changes there, but I just think we tend to pigeonhole people. But when someone from outside the organization who we think has a fresher perspective and point of view, tend to value that a little more.
You talked about curious leadership, and I think that's really important. What do you think is the difference, or what does a curious leader, I guess, do differently compared to a leader who's just trying to be decisive?
Sure. So for me, curious leadership, what it helps tackle or overcome is fear, comfort, and habits, which are all, I think is important to point out, that are all very innate human characteristics. We would not have survived as a human race without those three pieces of who humans are as individuals and beings, which means leaders take on those same characteristics. And much as they helped us survive and grow as a civilization, as human beings, when it comes to innovation, growth, and change, are the enemy. So if you want to, stay the status quo and just keep doing what you always done, by all means, stay in that type of mode. But if you want to innovate, grow, and change, you have to adopt curiosity, because curiosity is what allows us to shift how we think, how we work, and how we connect. And each piece of that is, how we think is moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, challenging the status quo, looking beyond our current situation's limitation, our operations. Are we doing things on a regular basis to constantly improve? That, as I keep talking about, how we connect is the culture piece, and how we bring our team along with us to be part of that journey of innovation, growth, and change.
One of the challenges that I've run into myself, and I know this happened to other people, is the illusion of curiosity from a leadership. So I worked with a CEO as a consultant who would say, everyone give me your opinions before we make this decision. And I asked the team, I said, how many times have you stopped him from making a decision you think is bad, or convinced him to make a decision that he didn't want to do originally? They said, never. He's never. So I was like, why are we having these meetings? I even said to him, I said, why do you ask everyone's opinion when you never take it? And he got really offended. And I was like, but it's fine. I also often don't want it. Like, once I've made a decision, I very rarely, right, once you've locked in. So I know I'm just as guilty of this, but it can become very tricky for an employee when you say, I want to hear your opinion. It's like, you never have before. Is this a trap? How do you kind of navigate that where people know that they can actually give their opinions and there's not the risk of repercussions or some type of punishment or even losing your job because you suddenly aren't rowing in the same direction as the team? Like, I certainly have felt that pressure before at jobs where, like, if I say what I actually feel, I'm out the door.
Yeah. Well, I want to throw an additional thing on top of that first before I get to the answer your question directly. I was in a mastermind recently, and someone was talking about how, they're there at the mastermind across the country, and her team of 40 people are blowing her up left and right because they have a problem they want her to solve. And everyone's kind of giving their advice. I finally raised my hand. I said, hey, if you weren't here at this mastermind and you were working at your desk at home, because the majority of her team is remote, and they brought you a problem, would you solve it for them? She said, of course I would. Well, then why do you expect them not to come to you now? If you always solve their problems, why would they ever change coming to you for a solution, whether you're sitting at your desk or sitting in a mastermind? And I bring that up to say, a lot of leaders will get upset when their team isn't solving problems or pointing out solutions and that sort of thing. But it really comes down to the culture they built. So if you are constantly just playing lip service to caring about your team's opinions and viewpoints, you're eventually going to erode that, right? They're eventually not going to give you their opinions. They're going to water them down. In today's culture, in today's generation of especially young people and professions, the biggest thing is they want to see that they're valued in the organization. If they don't feel valued, if their perspective doesn't matter, their opinions don't matter, and you constantly show that to them, they're going to stop showing up, not just giving the opinion, but showing up to work. They're going to find someone else who will value their opinion and value their efforts. And so, it's a hard thing to get through CEOs a lot of times because they're constantly, feel like they have to manage, have to lead, and have to dictate, and ideas have to come from them. And that's part of my biggest thing that I have to break through is breaking through on the CEO, letting them let go of that control, let go of that ego that they have to control everything. And one of the biggest things they can do is just start having one-on-one conversation with people on a regular basis, not about how they're doing their job, but what they're seeing in the organization, what they would do to improve their operations.
One of the challenges that I face is I want to create a culture where people solve their own problems. And then when they solve it bad, you're tempted to shout at them. But if you do that, and especially if you say something like, you should have just asked me, then and I catch myself doing this because then you create the culture of where they don't do anything self-sufficiently. And so it has to be, I would rather you try and fail and then I'll help you adjust. Now, if you make the same mistake twice, that's a different thing. Because a lot of people have once you set up a thing where they can self-solve and they have a little bit of authority, because like you said, you create yourself, you become the bottleneck, and suddenly you're trapped in your own business. You've painted yourself into a corner. You never have time off because people are afraid to make decisions without you. And I think this is what happens to leaders, which is that they say they want everyone to make self-decisions, but only if they're going to make the right decisions on their own.
Yeah. I used to have a leader, CEO that I worked for, who used to say, I don't want to know that you're thinking about something. I want you to be thinking like me, which is a completely different thing to kind of talk about when it comes to culture, because you're just eroding everything about that individual. Let's look at two types of failure. One being incompetence. Let's put that to the side, because if someone tries something and they just screwed it up because they weren't thinking about it, versus someone who tried something, it just didn't work out. They had a theory, they had a hypothesis, they did things intelligently, it just wasn't end up being the right thing to do. Those are two very different scenarios. One is a bigger conversation about who they are as a professional and whether or not they fit in that role and responsibility. The other one, if you want to innovate, grow, and change, you want to empower your team, you have to learn to accept failure to some degree. And the goal for me is that always try to have as many failures behind the scenes and not externally. Like that's one big key. And start small. Like if you've never inspired your team to make their own decisions and do things on their own, start with having them bring ideas to you, help them vet those ideas, let them make a decision by pointing out some flaws you may see in their logic or thinking, but leave it up to them to make the decision and report back to you what they decide before they do it. Those are some steps that you can get to so you can empower your team, show that you care, give them value in their perspective, but make sure that, you're not, driving the entire organization off a cliff.
So this kind of helps you to circle back to AI, because I kind of think of AI as a new employee, and that there's two kind of ways people deploy it, which is customer facing and internal. And the bigger mistake I see is when you put AI in charge of creating your content, writing your emails, managing your social media posts, handling customer service, all the customer facing areas. Because then when you have a mistake, it is customer facing. I saw an author this week who just got caught, their book had the section from the AI goes, okay, I'll rewrite the chapter for you. And they forgot to cut that out. Classic mistake, like the dead giveaway. And we're seeing a lot of this. Let's test it with the riskiest part of the business, right? The most public decision making. How do you kind of see this implementation fall in the exact same mistake you were just talking about, which is like, let's keep it internal so that when we make mistakes, no one sees it?
Yeah. Again, how I use AI is doing a lot of times the first 75 to 85%. And the remaining time has got to be your due diligence, you looking over it. I think one tool that I've used a little bit here and there is using two different AI platforms. If I have one created, I had the other one vetted, right? And then I'm still doing the last 5 or 10%, even if I go that direction. But you got to create anything we do in our business, we have to create safety mechanisms to make sure that we're catching issues before they occur. And using AI is no different. So doing that final read through, doing the due diligence we need to do on what AI is doing is absolutely crucial to make sure that we're not making those external mistakes.
So when do you think AI shifted for you from being a useful productivity tool to something that shifted and it can actually help you build meaningful and useful business assets?
Yeah, I think, part of it is my use has grown with AI. When I first started using AI, I don't know, probably not to like a year and a half, 2 years ago, having it try to create one pagers for me based upon my feedback and creating, outlines and things, it just wasn't there. But now, like I literally have, said AI, take my keynote that I just delivered. The organization I did a keynote for once, free giveaway to their audience, create me a one pager. Again, there's some back and forth. Like I don't just say create it. I blindly send it to the team, but like that would never have happened 2 years ago. At least in the way I want it done. Clean, organized, designed well. It would have been a very sloppy document. So I've increased my use of AI when it comes to the output of things as AI has grown.
So one of the things that I think is causing a lot of challenge in the current market with a lot of businesses is the constant messaging from AI companies, which is you can replace your employees with AI. This sets the stage where employees have an anti-AI motivation because it's like, this guy's coming for my job. This is my enemy. I'm going to I would sabotage it too, by the way. Like, absolutely. I'm going to protect my job. How can a company implement AI or start to bring AI into their workforce in a way that doesn't create a negative culture, that doesn't create a culture of sabotage, that kind of lets people know we're bringing in a new tool for you? And we've seen this before, right? And when the internet came out, when more computer tools came out in the 90s, a lot of people thought, oh, this computer is going to replace me. And so we've had this transition before for those of us in the workforce 30 years ago that remember it, and we're seeing it again. And I think the problem is not the tool. I think the problem is the rhetoric around the tools more than anything else.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it comes down to communication. Any type of change, and adopting AI is a change in your business and your organization. And you have to lead people through change. You have to communicate it properly. If you're out there, you're a CEO and you're constantly talking about how AI is going to change the world or crypto is going to change the world, and you're posting on your social media and LinkedIn about these type of things and championing layoffs for through AI and that sort of thing, you're going to give a very specific message about how you see AI. So you bring that to your team, that's going to cloud no matter what you say. So to me, it's important about how we talk about it, right? How in being responsible in how we talk about it, that AI is still just a tool. Again, tech companies, it might be a bigger, deeper tool that can replace some jobs. Most of small businesses are using AI in a way that is just going to help enhance your role, that this is a tool, just like accounting software is now sync with your payroll to reduce administration, how your CRM syncs with your whatever, and it just reduces some administrative labor so we can focus on strategy and execution more than administrative tasks. That's still what AI is. And so you have to talk that through with them and talk about it that way in meetings and slowly start introducing it, inspiring them to use it as a tool.
Do you think that the transition is going to be as big as some people think it is, where like 90% of people are going to be out of work and robots are taking everyone's job and then it's kind of become a wasteland?
Yeah. Again, I mean, I see AI mess up so much when I try to use it on a daily basis that like I have a hard time believing we're anywhere near that. I honestly don't believe we're at that point in my lifetime. I could be wrong. I know some people are saying, AI, because of AI is growing so quickly. It is advancing much more quickly than other technologies. So, I don't know the real answer to that. I guess for me, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to come to the pipeline. It's not worth worrying about, right? If this is true, if this is going to happen, there's nothing I can do about it, right? There literally is nothing I can do about AI taking over the world. But I do believe that, there have always been these things that are going to change the world and change society and change economy and change business. And we've always adapted. And there's always been things that are going to destroy the earth and destroy civilization. And we've always found ways to adapt. And I have to, believe that's going to be the same with AI, that there's not going to be some kind of devastating, catastrophic event, but something that we're going to learn to survive and work through and work on. And it becomes part of our society. Yes. but we'll find different ways to adapt.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next Monday with more tips and strategies on how to leverage AI to grow your business and achieve better results. In the meantime, if you're curious about how AI can boost your business's revenue, head over to artificialintelligencepod.com/calculator. Use our AI revenue calculator to discover the potential impact AI can have on your bottom line. It's quick, easy, and might just change the way you think about your business. While you're there, catch up on past episodes, leave a review, and check out our socials. I think you're right. I think that we're just overestimating how big a deal it is. Like when I was a child in the 80s, if you wanted to call someone, you had to remember their phone number, call it from your kitchen phone, hope your parents didn't pick up the other phone and listen in, and then hope that when you called, the other person was home. Or if you wanted to meet someone at the mall, you would go to the mall and just wait for them to show up. So like technology in my life, it has changed so significantly to now you're like texting in real time. How far away are you? Are you 3 minutes? Okay, I'll see if I can wait 3 minutes on my own. And it's like changed so much from like waiting 2 hours for your friends to show up, like such a difference in culture. So I feel like technology has been changing very quickly my entire life. Like when I talk to my kids about how excited I was to get a pager in high school, they're like, what's a pager? And I say, oh, your parents would send you a message with their phone number and then you'd go and find a payphone and call. Oh, what's a payphone? Okay. So a payphone is something you put money in to call someone. They're like, what are coins? So you just make so many different things. And I feel like that in the moment, we're caught up in this feeling of negativity. And that's why I think it's important to say, no, it's been happening fast our whole lives and it's just a continuation. And there are still jobs, more jobs than ever. And I think that's really positive. I think this has been really, really helpful. If you could just share your kind of final thoughts, and then of course, where people can find you who go, I need transformation. Maybe you can share a little about the SaaS you're building because that's very exciting. And we'll just wind it down. So this was amazing.
Yeah. So again, use AI as a tool. Stop the fear mongering and worry that it's going to replace replace employees, but just learn to use it. I am a big believer of a lot of statements that are going on right now that AI is not going to replace your job. Your job's going to be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI, right? Like that's the difference is that someone can do their job quicker, easier, more efficient, more effective because they're using AI than you. That's more of a risk of losing your job in majority of the business marketplace than being replaced by AI. Yeah, you mentioned the SaaS products. I've had a SaaS product I've wanted to build for a couple of years now and just haven't had the money to hire developers. I've done a couple deep dives with some developers and got the budgets and just didn't have the money. And then two different people encouraged me to start it with Claude Code. You know, they're like, John, the same way you talk to AI about your marketing and everything else you use it for, it's the exact same way you start with coding. And within 4 or 5 days, I had a fully functioning web app that synced with QuickBooks Online. I've now spent the next 3 weeks fine tuning and that type of stuff, and you're working on the user experience and just going through it 1,000 times to make it better. But I was amazed what I was able to build in just a few days and how fully functioning it was. Again, I've been working on this thing in my head for probably 3 or 4 years, so it was all baked in there. But it was quite amazing. So again, just find ways to use AI. Just start playing with it. Right, the best thing to do I can say is just start playing with it and learning how it works and learning how it can help you. And people are struggling with their leadership, their operations, their culture. The 2 websites I'll give you to reach out are my consulting site is consulting company is Lateral Solutions, and our website is think-lateral.com. And my personal brand site is jonbassford.com. John without an H, and then a bass like a fish and a Ford like a car. Best way to reach me.
Amazing. I'll make sure to put the links below the video and in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here for an amazing episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast.
Thank you for having me.